Okay, let's unpack this. We have a massive stack of sources today.
Yeah, we really do.
I mean, it's over 80 peer-reviewed articles. We've got stuff from Nature, Science, clinical trials, FDA regulatory guidelines, global health reports.
A lot of reading.
It is, and they all center on this one incredibly volatile topic, which is the collision of artificial intelligence and modern healthcare.
Right.
And for anyone like you listening to this who's just trying to stay well-informed, the medical AI space feels like, well, a constant whiplash.
Whiplash is exactly the word for it.
Like Monday's headline claims AI is curing rare cancers, and then Tuesday's investigative report reveals some algorithm hallucinated a diagnosis and, authorized the wrong medication.
Yeah, it's the absolute definition of an information bottleneck. We are just flooded with these isolated data points, and making sense of the aggregate trend is really challenging.
So what's our mission here?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the central theme we really need to explore today is this fundamental shift in the tech landscape. We are moving away from the era of just, demonstrating impressive technical tricks in a sterile lab.
Right, the lab is easy.
Exactly. The new era, which has much higher stakes, is entirely about integration. Like, how does this technology actually interface with incredibly complex, deeply entrenched, and fundamentally human health systems without causing harm?
Right, and the place where that integration hits the hardest, where the theoretical actually meets the physical, is right at the point of contact.
Diagnostic phase.
Exactly. A patient presents with a problem, and someone or something has to figure out what's wrong. So let's dive straight into the evidence we have on diagnostic accuracy.
Let's do it.
Because frankly, our sources are throwing heavy punches in completely opposite directions here. Like, we have this highly publicized study from Science, right?
Oh, yeah. The OpenAI one.
Yeah, where researchers essentially threw an OpenAI large language model into the deep end of clinical reasoning. They fed it these highly complex, real-world emergency department cases, and the headline finding was that the algorithm didn't just match the human doctors.
It outperformed them.
It outperformed them, which is wild.
It is wild. And, the Science study is a masterclass in demonstrating raw computational inference. But looking at that single trial in isolation is exactly how you get that informational whiplash you were just talking about.
Right.
To get an actual accurate read on the landscape, we really have to contrast it with that massive systematic review and meta-analysis published recently in NPJ Digital Medicine.
The one with the huge sample size.
Yes. They didn't just look at one trial or one model. They synthesized 83 distinct studies comparing generative AI to human physicians across, a vast array of diagnostic tasks.
Which is an incredibly robust sample size for this specific head-to-head comparison. And I dug into that meta-analysis, expecting it to, validate the science paper. But the aggregate data paints a much muddier picture.
It really does.
Yeah.
The meta-analysis revealed this critical stratification in performance. So the generative AI models demonstrated remarkable proficiency, like performing on par with or even slightly better than non-expert physicians.
Wait. Define non-expert in this context.
Sure. Think residents, generalists, encountering a rare presentation, or medical students.
Okay, got it.
However, across those 83 studies, the models remain broadly and consistently inferior to true subspecialty expert physicians.
Right, and I was trying to find an analogy for this performance gap because it isn't just about, the volume of knowledge.
No, it's not.
It's almost like putting a champion flight simulator pilot into the cockpit of a real Boeing 747 during a hurricane.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right, the simulator pilot knows every theoretical parameter, every aerodynamic equation, the exact layout of the instrument panel. It's perfect. But they lack the somatic environmental feedback.
They don't have the muscle memory.
Exactly. They don't know how the yoke feels when it shudders in a specific crosswind. The AI has infinite access to the aggregate text of global medical knowledge, but it has absolutely zero lived clinical experience.
And that gap between computational knowledge and clinical intuition is exactly where the friction lies. And importantly, it introduces a profound vulnerability for the novices we just mentioned.
The medical students.
Right. There was another trial in the NPJ Digital Medicine batch that focused exclusively on novice medical students. They set up a randomized trial to observe how these students synthesize AI-generated outputs.
Specifically focusing on when the AI gets it wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
What happens when the model hallucinated or provided plausible misinformation?
I read that trial, and I have to say the mechanism of the failure is what really terrified me.
The confidence of the AI.
Yes. The AI doesn't output a probabilistic hedge. It doesn't say, I am 43% confident this is lupus based on these vectors.
Right.
It outputs a deterministic, supremely confident, highly articulate explanation for why its hallucinated answer is the absolute only logical conclusion.
Because that confidence is mathematically engineered.
Wow.
The model is optimizing for syntax and coherence, right? Not necessarily empirical truth. So when the novice medical student reads that output, their own internal heuristic is hijacked.
What do you mean by heuristic in this case?
Well, normally a student relies on confidence markers to assess the validity of a superior's advice. If the attending physician sounds incredibly confident, the student defers to them.
That makes sense.
So the trial found that this plausible misinformation actively degraded the student's diagnostic accuracy. They just abandoned their own baseline clinical judgment because the machine sounded more authoritative than their own internal monologue.
That is so dangerous.
And fascinatingly, when the AI provided the correct information, the improvement to the student's learning was negligible compared to the massive degradation caused by the errors.
So the automation bias is asymmetric. Like, the downside of the hallucination massively outweighs the upside of the correct answer.
Precisely.
And if plausible misinformation is actively degrading the clinical reasoning of medical students who actually have training, what is it doing to the general public?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because we have a study here from Medical Express evaluating ordinary people using these models for self-triage. It's the classic scenario, right? It's 3 a.m., you have a weird pain, and instead of Googling it, you ask an advanced algorithm.
Right, and the baseline assumption in the tech sector was that LLMs would provide a massive upgrade over traditional search engines for patient triage.
Because Google just gives you WebMD telling you you're dying.
Right, exactly. A search engine hands you a list of links, usually leading to worst-case scenarios. An interactive model can, theoretically at least, triangulate your specific symptoms.
But the Medical Express study completely shattered that assumption.
Complete.
It turns out ordinary people using these advanced models made triage decisions like whether to stay home, go to urgent care, or call an ambulance that were no safer or more appropriate than people just using a standard search engine.
Which is wild.
It is. The technical accuracy of the model in a benchmark test simply did not translate into better real-world decision-making when placed in the hands of an anxious patient at 3 a.m.
Right. And this forces a major conceptual shift in how we view the architecture of care itself. For thousands of years, medicine has fundamentally been a dyad.
A two-way street.
Exactly. A two-way relationship between a healer and a patient. But what the nature literature is increasingly pointing out is that we are aggressively transitioning into a triad.
A three-way relationship.
Yes, encompassing the doctor, the patient, and the algorithmic interface.
Well, I want to push on that triad concept for a second because it doesn't always have to be adversarial or, a source of misinformation.
Fair point.
Look at the data presented by the European Society for Radiotherapy and Oncology, ESTRO. They tracked cancer patients preparing for radiation therapy.
Right, a scenario characterized by an almost unimaginable cognitive and emotional load.
Exactly. The patients are totally overwhelmed. But in this study, before the patients ever sat down with their human consultant, they interacted with an AI avatar.
An avatar designed specifically to act as an educational buffer.
Yeah. The avatar explained the mechanics of the radiation, the scheduling, the side effects, and the outcome was incredible.
It really was.
When those patients finally walked into the actual consultation, their stress markers were significantly lower. They were prepared, they were less reactive, and they asked the human doctor much more precise, focused questions.
It's a phenomenal use case for cognitive offloading. The algorithm absorbs the initial shock and handles the rote dissemination of information,
Right.
And that preserves the high-value human interaction for nuanced clinical strategy and empathy.
It sounds ideal. Honestly, it does. But here is where the triad gets really messy for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am a patient and I'm consulting an AI at home to synthesize my symptoms and understand my condition,
Yep.
then I go into the clinic and my physician is consulting an institutional AI to parse my chart and recommend a care plan. Who is actually driving the care?
Right.
I feel like the human doctor is increasingly being positioned as a mere API. Like a middleman just ferrying data between the patient's consumer algorithm and the hospital's enterprise algorithm.
That is the pivotal tension of this entire transition.
Yeah.
And to understand how rapidly that middleman dynamic is solidifying, You only need to look at what is actually happening during the clinical visit right now.
Right.
If you walk into a typical primary care clinic today, the most disruptive piece of AI technology you encounter isn't a robotic surgical arm or a diagnostic supercomputer.
No, it's not.
Is an ambient scribe.
The invisible listener in the room. And this brings up a major point in our stack regarding workflows and the hidden costs of operational efficiency. The reality is that modern physicians spend an absurd portion of their day not looking at patients, but staring at electronic health records.
Just clicking through endless drop-down menus.
Yes.
It's universally cited as the primary driver of physician burnout. The administrative burden is just crushing. So the deployment of ambient AI scribes is being met with massive enthusiasm.
Understandably.
According to a recent American Medical Association survey, a vast majority of physicians utilizing AI professionally are heavily leaning on these ambient tools.
Right. And just to clarify for everyone, these are applications running on a secure phone or tablet in the exam room. They capture the raw, messy, nonlinear acoustic data of the conversation between the doctor and the patient.
All the ums and ahs and tangents.
Exactly. They use diarization to separate the speakers, filter out the small talk about the weather, and instantly synthesize the relevant clinical data into a perfectly structured, highly detailed note that drops directly into the medical record.
It's like magic.
It is. Companies like NVIDIA and startups like Abridge are deploying specialized acoustic models strictly for this environment. And hospitals like Stanford and Penn Medicine are deploying internal generative models just to summarize the mountains of data already in the charts.
And the immediate feedback from clinicians is overwhelmingly positive. It is returning hours of their day.
They can actually look at the patient again.
Exactly. They're regaining the ability to maintain eye contact rather than acting as a data entry clerk.
I get the appeal, I really do. But I cannot stop thinking about Elia Barakat's opinion piece in Stat.
Oh, that piece is fantastic.
She throws a massive wrench into this celebration of efficiency. Her core argument is that we have completely mischaracterized the purpose of a physician's note.
How so?
We view it as administrative red tape,
Right.
A chore to be automated. But Barakat argues that the physical act of writing the note is the act of clinical reasoning.
It's a profound critique of cognitive offloading.
Because the process of structuring a clinical narrative, deciding which symptom is the primary driver, which historical detail is a red herring, and synthesizing the differential diagnosis, that cognitive friction is how a physician builds their internal mental model of the patient.
So if we outsource the documentation to a sophisticated algorithm and the doctor simply skims a pre-populated summary and clicks approve, are we outsourcing the act of thinking itself?
That's the fear.
Are we inducing a kind of cognitive atrophy?
Andrew Wyong echoed exactly this concern in his NPJ digital medicine analysis regarding medical education.
What did he find?
Well, think about it. If an attending physician relies on an AI scribe, the residents training under them never witnessed the structural formulation of medical logic.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the residents.
Right. The note is the scaffolding of clinical thought. Without the friction of building that scaffolding, developing true clinical intuition becomes incredibly difficult.
That makes it total sense.
Furthermore, studies in health and technology reveal that while doctors love the time saved, they are deeply anxious about the loss of vigilance.
Because of the liability.
Exactly.
If the ambient scribe subtly misunderstands a mumbled symptom or hallucinated a negative finding for a system it didn't actually hear discussed, and the exhausted doctor signs off on that note, the software vendor isn't carrying the malpractice insurance.
No, they're not.
The physician is.
Precisely. But, the implications of ambient scribes extend far beyond cognitive atrophy and legal liability. There is a secondary mechanism at play here, and it completely subverts the standard economic narrative of automation.
Okay, yes, the Axios investigation. This was the most counterintuitive revelation in the entire stack for me.
It's fascinating.
The baseline assumption is that automation drives efficiency, and efficiency drives down costs. If doctors spend less time typing, they can see more patients, overhead drops, and healthcare gets cheaper.
That is the standard industrial logic.
Right.
But healthcare economics, particularly in the United States, does not follow standard industrial logic.
No, it does not.
It is governed by a highly complex framework of billing codes.
Right. Explain the exact mechanism of this, because the Axios piece argues that AI scribes are actively driving healthcare costs up.
Yes.
How does a transcription tool inflate the macroeconomics of a hospital system?
It revolves around how clinical encounters are valued. When a provider bills an insurance company, they assign a code that dictates the reimbursement rate.
Okay.
A level 3 visit pays out significantly less than a highly complex level 5 visit.
Makes sense.
For decades, the justification for billing a higher level code has been tied directly to the volume and comprehensiveness of the documentation in the patient's chart, specifically elements like the review of systems and the breadth of the physical exam noted.
So historically, a human doctor working a 12-hour shift, exhausted at the end of the day, is going to write a highly concise note.
Exactly. They document exactly what is clinically necessary to treat the patient and nothing more.
Because they're tired.
Because they're tired. And because the note is brief, the billing software flags it as a standard mid-level visit.
But an ambient AI scribe doesn't experience cognitive fatigue.
Never.
It captures every single stray remark. Like, if the patient mentions an old knee surgery in passing while discussing a sore throat, the AI structures that into a comprehensive historical review.
Yep. It generates a massively robust, impeccably detailed document for every single encounter.
And when the automated billing software scans that AI-generated note, it sees a masterclass in comprehensive documentation. It sees a massive review of systems, and it automatically suggests upcoding the encounter to a level 4 or level 5 visit.
Right. The algorithm is mechanically optimizing the documentation for maximum revenue capture.
That is wild.
So a tool deployed under the guise of clinical efficiency interacts with the perverse financial incentives of the system to aggressively inflate the cost of care. Insurers are billed more, which inevitably trickles down to patients via higher premiums.
It completely reframes the technology. It isn't just a neutral tool observing the clinic, it's an active participant in the financial machinery.
Exactly.
But as fascinating as the economics are, the stakes change dramatically when we step out of the outpatient clinic and into the high acuity environments. Let's move to the operating room and the oncology wards.
This is the transition from administrative and financial risk to immediate physical patient safety.
And the independent safety watchdogs are terrified. ECRI, which is one of the leading authorities on healthcare technology safety, released a report identifying what they term the AI diagnostic dilemma as their absolute #1 patient safety concern for 2026.
Number one.
Number one. This isn't theoretical future casting. They are ranking this above hospital-acquired infections and pharmaceutical errors right now.
We need to unpack what they mean by dilemma because it echoes the automation bias we discussed with the medical students, but on a much more dangerous scale.
Okay.
The dilemma isn't just that a machine learning model might misclassify a pixel on an X-ray. The dilemma is the systemic degradation of human oversight. When a system is highly accurate, say 98% of the time, the human operator naturally relaxes their vigilance.
Which means when the 2% error happens, the human isn't paying enough attention to catch it.
Exactly.
And we have an incredibly sobering investigation from Reuters looking at exactly this phenomenon in surgical suites. They analyzed FDA incident reports and litigation regarding AI-enabled surgical navigation platforms.
These are highly advanced, semi-autonomous tools used to map patient anatomy and guide surgical instruments in real time.
Right. And the investigation uncovered instances of botched procedures, severe tissue damage, and misidentified anatomical structures directly linked to the utilization of these systems.
Yes.
How does that happen? Does the software just glitch and tell the surgeon to cut the wrong thing?
It's often more insidious than a hard crash. It can involve subtle spatial misalignments.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, if the AI's internal model of the patient's anatomy drifts even slightly from the physical reality on the table, and the surgeon is relying entirely on the digital overlay rather than their direct visual field, they can sever a nerve or ligate the wrong vessel before they even realize the map is wrong.
Oh, wow.
It demonstrates that a software hallucination in a billing office is an audit risk. A software hallucination in the OR is a catastrophic kinetic event.
But despite the kinetic risks in surgery, multiple sources in our stack point to a different specialty as the absolute toughest proving ground for medical AI.
Oncology.
Oncology, yes. Cancer care is widely considered the ultimate stress test for clinical algorithms.
That's absolutely.
Why? If these models are so good at pattern recognition, shouldn't they excel at analyzing tumor pathology and staging?
In a pristine environment, yes. But the healthcare IT news analysis highlights the reality of the data infrastructure.
Ah, the data.
Oncology is incredibly complex because the disease is longitudinal and multisystemic.
Yeah.
A single cancer patient will generate data across multiple disconnected silos. Well, their initial imaging is at an outpatient radiology center. Their biopsy pathology is processed by an independent lab. Their genomic sequencing is handled by a specialized vendor, and their infusion data is stored in a hospital's proprietary electronic health record.
And none of those systems naturally talk to each other.
No, they use different formatting standards, different terminologies.
So the data is fundamentally fragmented and messy.
Exactly. If you train a convolutional neural network on a perfectly curated dataset of thousands of pristine MRIs, it learns to identify tumors with superhuman accuracy.
Right.
But when you deploy that same model into a real hospital and feed it an incomplete, poorly formatted chart filled with clinical shorthand and missing lab values, the model's accuracy plummets.
But when the data is structured properly, the capabilities are staggering.
Truly staggering.
We can't let the infrastructure problems overshadow the clinical breakthroughs. The reports from the Mayo Clinic platform and MIT are detailing models that are fundamentally altering prognostication.
Yes, the predictive models.
They have deep learning models continuously analyzing telemetry and lab data to predict acute heart failure decompensation up to a year before it happens.
That is the shift from reactive medicine to proactive predictive medicine.
And they are utilizing advanced models to detect the earliest microscopic topological changes in pancreatic tissue, catching pancreatic cancer, which is notoriously asymptomatic until it's terminal, at stages where human radiologists simply cannot perceive the anomaly.
It's life-changing.
They're also classifying the intricate molecular subtypes of complex brain tumors like meningiomas directly from imaging to guide highly personalized surgical and radiation plans.
The pattern recognition capabilities far exceed human biological limits.
They do.
But, and there's always a but, there's a massive vulnerability embedded in this reliance on algorithmic image analysis, and it brings up a vector of risk that is almost entirely absent from the mainstream conversation.
You are talking about the deepfakes. This was the most dystopian paper in the entire stack. A study published by the Radiological Society of North America, the RSNA, focused not on how AI interprets imaging, but on how generative AI can alter medical imaging.
We are all familiar with deepfakes in the context of political videos or manipulated audio.
Right.
This study applied that exact same generative adversarial network, or GAN technology, to medical data.
Explain the mechanism of how this actually works. How do you deepfake a lung scan?
So a GAN essentially pits two algorithms against each other. One generates synthetic data, and the other tries to detect if it's fake.
Okay.
Over millions of cycles, the generator becomes incredibly skilled at producing imperceptible alterations. In this study, they used a GAN to inject synthetic noise into the digital file of a healthy patient's CT scan.
Synthetic noise.
Right. The noise alters the pixel gradients to seamlessly render a highly realistic lung nodule.
And this synthetic tumor is so realistic that it fools the human radiologists evaluating the scan.
Yes.
But that wasn't even the most terrifying part of the RSNA study.
No. The critical finding was that the deepfake scan also completely fooled the hospital's own AI diagnostic systems.
Oh my God.
The synthetic data successfully bypassed both human and algorithmic detection.
This opens up an entirely new, catastrophic cybersecurity threat in healthcare infrastructure.
It really does.
Imagine a scenario where a bad actor infiltrates a hospital network. They don't steal patient data to sell on the dark web. They deploy a GAN to subtly alter the imaging records of specific individuals.
Yes.
They could synthesize a tumor onto a politician's MRI or erase evidence of trauma in a liability case, or systematically alter scans to commit massive insurance fraud.
The possibilities are horrifying.
If our entire diagnostic apparatus is migrating toward algorithmic reliance, and the underlying data can be seamlessly forged by other algorithms, the fundamental trust in clinical evidence just evaporates.
It radically expands the definition of medical security. It's no longer just about HyperRA compliance and keeping the files locked. It's about verifying the cryptographic integrity of every single pixel of diagnostic data from the moment it leaves the scanner.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time on the vulnerabilities of analyzing clinical data, but what if the greatest impact of this technology isn't in reading a patient's chart, but in building the tools to treat them before they ever arrive at the clinic?
Oh, yes.
Let's pivot to the pharmacy and the laboratory.
This is a crucial shift in perspective. If diagnostic data is messy and vulnerable, the foundational biology of drug discovery presents a much cleaner, albeit incredibly complex, computational problem.
And traditional drug discovery is notoriously broken. We're talking about a process that often takes over a decade and costs billions of dollars to bring a single novel compound to market.
Yes.
It's essentially microscopic trial and error.
Historically, yes. You identify a target receptor associated with the disease, and then you physically screen massive libraries of millions of chemical compounds, just hoping to find one that binds to the target without causing systemic toxicity.
The classic analogy is always a lock and a key, right?
Right.
The disease is the lock, and you have a giant key ring with a million physical keys, and you just stand there trying them one by one.
Exactly.
But the models we're seeing now require better analogy. It's more like trying to solve a multidimensional, constantly shifting topological puzzle in complete darkness. What the AI does is turn on the lights.
I like that.
It doesn't just guess keys, it calculates the exact molecular geometry, the electromagnetic affinities, and the folding trajectories of the target, and then it engineers a bespoke key that fits perfectly on the first try.
That is precisely what tools like Google DeepMind's co-scientists are designed to do. Vivek Natarajan's work, which was highlighted in the Business Insider profile, shows the algorithm acting not as a search engine, but as an autonomous reasoning agent. Yes. It ingests the entirety of global biomedical literature, identifies structural gaps in our understanding of protein folding, and autonomously generates novel biological hypotheses for human researchers to test.
And we have concrete proof that this isn't just theoretical modeling. The Reuters piece details a massive victory by Takeda Pharmaceuticals.
Oh, the psoriasis drug.
Yes, they developed a novel, once-daily oral medication for psoriasis. The compound was structurally engineered with heavy reliance on AI platforms. They put this AI-crafted drug into late-stage, head-to-head clinical trials against an established blockbuster drug from Bristol-Myers Squibb.
And the AI-generated compound demonstrated superior efficacy.
It won.
It did. It outperformed the traditional, iteratively developed drug. The FDA has taken this so seriously that they have established dedicated frameworks acknowledging that machine learning is now deeply embedded in the entire life cycle of pharmaceutical development.
From the very beginning.
From initial target identification all the way through clinical trial design and post-market pharmacovigilance.
But synthesizing a better pill is just the beginning. The researchers at MIT are pushing this into realms that sound like pure science fiction.
They really are.
They are merging generative AI with synthetic biology to create programmable interventions.
Their work on antimicrobial resistance is a perfect example of this.
Right.
Global health authorities view drug-resistant superbugs as an existential threat. Standard antibiotics are failing. So the MIT team used AI models to explore chemical spaces completely orthogonal to existing antibiotic structures.
Meaning entirely new types of molecules?
Exactly. They mathematically designed molecules that bypass the established evolutionary defenses of these bacteria.
I find that incredible, but it was another MIT project that truly stopped me in my tracks. They are moving the computational design inside the human body.
The nanoparticles.
Yes. Explain the mechanism behind these AI-designed peptide-coated nanoparticles because it completely subverts how we think about cancer screening.
It is a brilliant application of synthetic biomarkers. Currently, to detect a tumor, we rely on large, expensive imaging equipment to find a physical mass.
Yeah.
Or we look for naturally occurring biomarkers in the blood that are often too diluted to detect early.
Right.
The MIT team asked, what if we engineer our own highly amplified biomarker?
So how do they actually build it?
They use algorithms to design microscopic nanoparticles, essentially tiny delivery vehicles. The crucial step is that they coat these nanoparticles with very specific peptides, which are short chains of amino acids.
Okay, got it.
The AI engineers these peptides to be perfectly recognized and cleaved by proteases. Proteases are basically biological scissors.
And tumors produce specific proteases to cut through surrounding tissue so they can grow, right?
Exactly. The AI specifically designs the peptide coat to be vulnerable only to the exact scissors produced by the target cancer.
Okay.
When a patient ingests or is injected with these nanoparticles, they circulate harmlessly through the bloodstream. If there's no cancer, nothing happens.
But if there is?
If a tumor is present, its unique proteases encounter the nanoparticles and cut the peptides off the surface.
The scissors cut the string.
Right. Those severed synthetic peptides are then carried away in the bloodstream. Because they are so small, they're rapidly filtered by the kidneys and excreted in the patient's urine.
So the severed peptide is the flare gun.
Yes.
You don't need a $1 million MRI machine. You can administer these AI-designed nanoparticles, have the patient take a simple, cheap urine test on a paper strip, and if the specific peptides are present, you know definitively that those specific cancer proteases are active in the body.
Exactly.
It takes complex diagnostic imaging and reduces it to a piece of paper.
It's the ultimate democratization of early detection.
And that concept of democratization forces us to pivot to a completely different vantage point. Because it is an incredible triumph that researchers in Cambridge, Massachusetts can mathematically engineer a programmable nanoparticle. But if you live in a rural village in a developing nation, or frankly, in an under-resourced neighborhood in a major American city, your access to an MIT-designed synthetic biomarker is virtually zero.
Absolutely zero.
How do we take these massive computational leaps and apply them to the reality of global deployment?
This is where the discourse often fails. We focus intensely on whether AI can replace an elite subspecialist at a premier academic medical center. But a phenomenal report in Nature focuses on a fundamentally different paradigm, task shifting in global health environments.
The report specifically looked at deployments in Rwanda and Pakistan.
Yes.
In these health systems, you aren't dealing with a question of human versus machine optimization. You are dealing with catastrophic scarcity. You might have a single clinician responsible for triaging over 100 patients a day.
In that environment, the baseline alternative to algorithmic care isn't a world-class physician. The alternative is zero care.
Right.
The Nature report evaluated the deployment of cheap, mobile-based AI chatbots designed to assist nurses and community health workers.
And the results showed that these accessible, low-bandwidth models significantly elevated the diagnostic baseline.
They act as a floor-raising technology.
Right. They empower local health workers to safely manage more complex triage decisions, stretching the incredibly limited resources of the overarching health system.
However, to deploy these models safely across diverse global populations, we crash into a massive structural barrier. And this is brilliantly articulated by Freddie Abnousi and Selena Young in their piece for STAT.
The lived experience piece.
Yes, they identify a fundamental flaw in the underlying architecture of medical AI.
They call it the lived experience data deficit. I want to try a new analogy for this because it perfectly captures why these algorithms struggle outside the lab.
Let's hear it.
Think of your medical history like a restaurant. The electronic health record, the data the AI trains on, is just the receipt.
Okay.
It tells you exactly what was ordered, what time the order was placed, and exactly how much it cost. It is a perfect, sterile, transactional record.
That is an excellent way to frame it.
But the receipt tells you absolutely nothing about the meal itself. It doesn't tell you if the food was too salty, if the restaurant was too loud, if you were eating alone or with friends, or how you felt when you walked out the door.
Right.
The receipt is the chart. The meal is your lived experience.
And Abnousi and Young argue that currently, these multi-billion-dollar AI models are being trained almost exclusively on a diet of receipts.
Just receipts.
Formal chart notes, discrete lab values, structured billing codes. This data captures a momentary snapshot of a patient sitting in an exam room, but it entirely misses the vast continuum of their actual life.
Like what?
Like their daily functional status, the social determinants of health governing their neighborhood, the minute-to-minute fluctuations of their symptoms, their environmental exposures.
So if the algorithm only understands the transactional data, it will always be myopic.
Exactly.
It will make recommendations that might be biochemically sound but practically impossible for the patient to execute given their lived reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Truly transformative medical AI requires re-architecting health data to capture that continuous, messy, lived reality.
Right.
But integrating that level of granular personal data introduces immense complexity regarding certainty and trust, which is why the counter-movement out of MIT regarding humble AI is so vital.
I love the concept of humble AI because right now the default setting for tech companies is omniscience. The models are engineered to provide a confident answer no matter what.
Because in a consumer tech environment, a chatbot that says, "I don't know," is viewed as a failure of the product.
Exactly.
But in medicine, "I don't
Yeah.
know" is often the safest and most accurate clinical assessment.
So how does a developer actually build humility into a neural network?
It involves recalibrating the mathematical thresholds of the model.
Okay.
When an AI generates a prediction, it usually uses a function called sockmax to output a probability distribution, which then translates into a definitive answer.
Okay.
Humble AI involves explicitly programming the model to recognize its own epistemic uncertainty.
What does that mean?
If the patient data it is analyzing falls too far outside the statistical distribution of its training data, say, a rare edge case or a demographic it hasn't seen before, the model is programmed to hit a hard stop.
It just stops.
Right. It flagged the low confidence interval and explicitly forces human collaboration. It refuses to make the decision.
It's an algorithmic safety valve.
Yeah.
It forces the human clinician to re-engage, breaking that dangerous automation bias we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
But if we are going to start feeding our messy lived experiences into these models, we run headfirst into a massive crisis of trust and a totally Wild West regulatory landscape.
Yeah.
Let's look at who is actually policing this data.
And the data indicates that public trust is moving inversely to technological capability.
It's incredible. We have a survey from the Ohio State University Medical Center showing that public openness to healthcare AI is actively slipping.
It's going down.
Yeah. As the tools become more visible in the clinic, patients are becoming more wary. And the Würzburg study from Germany pinpoints exactly why this social friction exists.
They studied the perception of empathy in technologically mediated care.
The study found that patients view human doctors who utilize AI as fundamentally less empathetic and less competent.
Even if it's just for notes.
Yes. Even if the physician is merely using the AI for administrative offloading, like the ambient scribes, the patient's perception shifts. They see the doctor deferring to a machine, and they feel a barrier go up.
The triad again.
Right. The patient doesn't just want a diagnosis, they want a witness to their suffering. When the machine enters the room, that shared human witness feels diluted.
And that human vulnerability, that desire for a witness, is being aggressively exploited in the less regulated corners of health AI, specifically regarding mental health.
The Journal of Medical Ethics piece on the commodification of mental health data is truly alarming. We have millions of people interacting with consumer-facing AI companion bots.
They're using them as proxy therapists.
Exactly. They are typing deeply traumatic, highly personal disclosures into a chat window, assuming the interface is safe because it responds with programmed empathy.
But because these chatbots are positioned as consumer entertainment or wellness apps, rather than formal medical devices, they operate in a vast regulatory gray area.
So no IPA.
No IPA.
Yeah.
They're not bound by IPA or equivalent medical confidentiality laws?
So the raw data pipeline, the patient's darkest anxieties and traumas, is ingested, structurally analyzed, and monetized. It is turned into commercial behavioral profiles.
It's terrifying.
The algorithms learn exactly what triggers the user's anxiety, and that data can be utilized to target them with hyper-specific advertising when they are mathematically most vulnerable.
It is a massive strip mining of psychological data occurring completely outside the purview of traditional medical ethics.
Which highlights the absolute urgency for regulatory intervention. The boundaries between a wellness app, a diagnostic tool, and a medical device are entirely collapsing.
And the regulators are clearly scrambling.
Yeah.
I want to look at a detail from a piece published in the BMJ that genuinely shocked me.
In Sweden.
Yes, in Sweden, an AI system has been legally authorized to make autonomous decisions regarding prescription renewals.
To clarify for everyone, it is not drafting a renewal request for a human physician to authorize.
No. The algorithm evaluates the chart and executes the legal prescribing action independently.
It crosses the Rubicon from administrative support into legally significant medical action, which forces the ultimate unresolved question of this entire transition. If that Swedish AI makes a mistake, if it renews a medication that interacts fatally with a new supplement the patient started taking, or if an ambient scribe drops a critical symptom from a note, who is legally responsible?
Right. Who gets sued?
Who gets sued?
The liability framework is currently a black hole. We have a stark warning from the Medical Protection Society in the UK. They're cautioning that under current legal paradigms, the human physician and the health system remain entirely liable for algorithmic errors.
Which is an impossible standard. The law insists the doctor is the final backstop. But how can a physician personally underwrite the safety of a deep learning algorithm?
They can't.
They don't have access to the proprietary training data. They don't understand the multi-layered neural pathways the machine uses to reach its conclusion. It is a black box. You are demanding the human take legal responsibility for the hidden math of a trillion-dollar tech company.
It creates massive friction for adoption. And the regulatory bodies attempting to build a new framework are facing a nightmare scenario.
What's happening in the U.S.?
Well, in the United States, an analysis in NEJM AI details how the federal vacuum has led to individual states passing a fragmented, chaotic patchwork of AI healthcare laws.
Of course.
Colorado has one set of rules regarding algorithmic transparency, while Texas passes contradictory regulations regarding prior authorizations.
Which is completely unworkable for software that scaled instantaneously across borders. And at the federal level, the FDA is trying to adapt, but they are dealing with a phenomenon entirely unique to machine learning called performance drift.
Traditional medical device regulation is static. You test a physical pacemaker. If it performs safely, you approve it, and its fundamental operational physics never change.
But an AI model is dynamic. It learns and adapts based on the new data it ingests after deployment. Explain the math of how a previously safe model suddenly drifts into danger.
It generally falls into two categories: concept drift and covariate shift.
Okay, let's break those down.
Covariate shift happens when the statistical distribution of the real-world input data changes from the training data.
Give me an example.
If you train a diagnostic model exclusively on data from a tertiary research hospital in Boston, where the population has specific demographics and disease prevalences,
Right.
and then deploy that exact same model to a rural clinic in New Mexico, the underlying mathematical assumptions of the model no longer align with the physical reality of the new patient population.
It's a totally different environment.
Exactly. Its accuracy degrades, and it can introduce severe, unseen biases. Concept drift is even harder. It's when the actual definition of the disease or the standard of care changes over time, rendering the model's foundational logic obsolete.
So the FDA is recognizing that pre-market approval is basically meaningless for a learning algorithm.
Yes.
They are desperately trying to mandate continuous real-world post-market surveillance because the AI you approve in January might be a mathematically different, fundamentally less safe entity by October.
Exactly. The regulatory apparatus has to shift from a gatekeeper model to a continuous monitoring model.
Which perfectly sets up the most radical paradigm-shifting idea in our entire stack of sources. It's an opinion piece in Stat proposing a completely new legal and regulatory framework inspired by a pilot program in Utah called Doctronic.
This is a wild idea.
The author argues that we need to stop trying to regulate autonomous clinical AI as if it were a piece of software or a traditional medical device. The proposal is that we should grant these AI algorithms actual medical licenses.
It is a profound conceptual leap. You treat the algorithm not as a tool, but as a non-human practitioner.
Exactly like a human doctor. The AI would have to apply to a medical board. It would have to pass rigorous, standardized competency testing.
Right.
Before it could operate autonomously, it would be required to undergo a supervised residency period, co-signing charts with a human attending physician.
A robot residency.
A robot residency. It would be subject to ongoing peer review. And crucially, if the post-market surveillance catches performance drift, if the AI starts making unsafe recommendations, the medical board has the authority to revoke the algorithm's license to practice medicine.
It forces accountability into the system. It acknowledges the reality that these systems are acting as independent agents within the care pathway, and therefore they must be governed by the same rigorous, iterative standards of clinical excellence that we demand of human physicians.
Okay, we have covered an immense landscape today.
We really have.
We've navigated the asymmetric dangers of automation bias in novices, the hidden macroeconomic inflation caused by AI scribes, the terrifying cybersecurity reality of diagnostic deepfakes.
The synthetic biology breakthroughs.
Yes, the incredible promise of synthetic biology and programmable nanoparticles, and the radical necessity of licensing algorithms. As we look at this entire messy convergence, what is the grand synthesis here?
If we distill everything we've analyzed, the staggering computational triumphs and the profound systemic risks, the clearest takeaway is this. The future of clinical intelligence is not a simplistic sci-fi substitution where a robot assumes the role of your physician.
Right.
Instead, we are witnessing the fundamental structural rewiring of the entire healthcare infrastructure. To navigate this safely, we must maintain an incredibly delicate equilibrium.
An equilibrium.
Yes, we have to embrace the monumental scientific capabilities, the ability to mathematically simulate billions of molecular interactions to cure a disease or democratize early cancer detection via synthetic biomarkers.
We need that progress.
We do. But that technological acceleration must be counterbalanced by rigorous, humble, human-centered oversight. The computation is advancing exponentially, but the bedrock values of clinical empathy, critical vigilance, and legal accountability must remain the unshakable anchor of the system.
The human values must remain the unshakable anchor. I think that is perfectly stated. And to you, listening to this, You are not just a passive observer of this transition.
No, you're not.
Whether you are a patient trying to decide if you trust an AI symptom checker to analyze your lived experience before your next appointment, or you are a clinician wrestling with the liability of a fragmented EHR system managed by a new algorithmic assistant, you are an active participant in this medical revolution.
Absolutely.
Your demand for transparency, your protection of your own data, and your insistence on human accountability are going to shape exactly how this technology is deployed.
The structural choices made by patients, providers, and regulators in this immediate window will cement the trajectory of global healthcare for decades to come.
Absolutely. And I want to leave you with a final thought, something to ponder that wasn't explicitly debated in these 80 sources, but feels like the inevitable destination of everything we've discussed today.
Okay.
Let's go back to that traditional doctor's office we all know. In the future, as autonomous algorithms become perfectly capable of reading our vitals instantaneously, mathematically predicting our cancers years in advance, and engineering bespoke synthetic prescriptions with zero mathematical errors, will the sheer inefficiency of human interaction, the unhurried, unstructured conversation, the physical reassurance of a hand on a shoulder, the shared, messy empathy of two mortals facing the terrifying reality of illness together, will that inefficiency become the ultimate, priceless luxury good in modern healthcare? We'll leave you to mull that over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.